Al-Ja'fari asserts the mercenary terrorists have committed horrible massacres against civilians in Syria, supported by Qatari, Saudi and Turkish sides. Moscow accuses Washington, London and Paris of covering up for the terrorists who used chemical weapons in Al-Ghouta in order to summon foreign intervention. The Syrian Arab Army continues its operations in Adra and eliminates a large number of terrorists. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Irado Krikorian from the News Center in Damascus. Syria's permanent representative to the UN, Dr. Bashar al-Ja'fari, has asserted that the third stage of the UN plan to get rid of the Syrian chemical weapons has already started. Al-Ja'fari said the file of the Syrian chemical weapons must be closed, but should be accurately followed up and focused upon from now on, as this would realize a UN goal in freeing the Middle East from such weapons. Al-Ja'fari urged the UN to exercise pressure on the Saudi, Qatari and Turkish regimes to stop their support for the terrorist gangs who have been committing barbaric massacres against innocent civilians. Russia's permanent representative to the UN, Vitaly Churkin, has accused Washington, London and Paris of doing their best to obstruct reaching the truth about the use of chemical weapons in Khan al-Assal. Following a closed session held by the UN Security Council, Churkin said Moscow has not heard from its partners at the international organization any evidence that refutes the use by the armed groups in Syria of chemical weapons, a thing that had been asserted by the international experts. Churkin said it was odd for the Western partners to insist on accusing the Syrian government of using chemical weapons during the discussions of the UN experts' report on their use at the UN General Assembly last Friday. He said the evidence presented by the USA in this respect is not convincing. Russia's permanent representative to the UN pointed out that his country had asked Washington for additional information that would confirm the Syrian government's use of chemical weapons, but Washington ignored the request. Churkin added that what happened on the 21st of August in Al-Ghouta in Damascus suburbs was a provocative act intended to summon foreign intervention. The Iranian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mardiya Afkham has reiterated her country's stand that calls for solving the Syrian crisis through political means and rejecting any preconditions for Iran's presence at the Geneva II International Conference on Syria. She pointed out that her country would participate in the conference if it was invited. In her weekly press conference today, Afkham expressed Iran's concern over the growing terrorism that is today threatening the world community as a whole. She stressed the need for the world community to work to solve this problem and to take unified steps to realize this objective. Syrian Arab Army continued its national task in Adra, killing large numbers of terrorists and evacuating some citizens. Battles continued between Syrian Arab Army and the armed terrorist groups around Adra, as the army controlled new positions with the aim of encircling the terrorists from many directions around Adra al-Balad and Adra al-Ummaliya, where the terrorists have taken the citizens as human shields, complicating a wide-range military operation. Syrian Arab Army forced the terrorists to gather in certain areas in order to spare the civilians from being under fire. The army also tended to strike at specific locations where the terrorists are gathered and made sure to cut off their communication with each other. Syrian Arab army units destroyed today several vehicles for the terrorists loaded with weapons and ammunition, killing many terrorists and injuring others in a number of villages and towns in Hom's countryside. A military source said that Syrian Arab army eliminated armed terrorist groups that were trying to sneak into the villages of Al-Barghouthiyya and Arshuna in Al-Mukharram. Also, dozens of terrorists were killed and others wounded in the villages of Ad-Dar al-Kabira and Al-Ghanto. The source said that a Syrian Arab army unit destroyed several vehicles loaded with weapons and ammunition near the roundabout of Maslabat al-Ashtar and killed a terrorist group in the street of Stariko in Ar-Rastan. Wahhabi terrorism is not limited to murder, slaughter and vandalism, but a great part of it is aimed at destroying the human heritage.
This is what has been happening in Ma'lula nowadays. A systematic stealing process of all the artifacts and ancient sarcophagi and crosses is taking place. The aim is commercial profit, as they are offered for sale. This has been reported by the Lebanese newspaper Al-Akhbar, which revealed that the thieves are communicating with brokers and smugglers who undertake to sell them outside Syria. The terrorists' fatwas also affected the ancient statues, depending on an ignorant, dark way of thinking which claims that the monuments that are the legacy of the successive historical civilizations in Syria are nothing but idols worshipped instead of God, and they should be flattened, such as the statue of Abi al-Ala al-Ma'ri, which was beheaded. Destruction also didn't spare the shrines and tombs of Prophet Muhammad's companions, such as the mausoleum of Ammar bin Yasser and Hijr bin Adi, as well as landmarks such as the giant tree of Atama, which is 200 years old and was cut off by the terrorists under the pretext that it would be worshipped instead of God. It is worth mentioning that the Department of Antiquities in Lebanon and Syria, in cooperation with the Interpol and other international organizations, has succeeded in confiscating 18 Syrian mosaic pieces on the border with Lebanon and 73 smuggled works of art that were up for sale by antiquity traders.
People's Assembly Speaker Muhammad Jihad al-Laham has underlined the need to activate and coordinate the work of the Assembly's committees and benefit from the big potentials guaranteed by the Constitution to the People's Assembly to improve the services offered to citizens. During a meeting of the Public Freedoms and Human Rights Committee at the Assembly, Laham said, "The homeland needs the efforts of all its citizens, particularly the People's Assembly, in order to meet citizens' requirements." The Assembly Speaker pointed out that the committee is responsible for focusing light on the terrorist acts perpetrated by the armed groups, which violate citizens' public freedoms and human rights. He called on the committee's members to meet with the families and individuals whose freedoms and rights have been violated. Welcome back. In Lebanon, a suicidal terrorist has detonated a car bomb between the towns of Sabuba and Wadi Musa on the road to Baalbek, causing injuries, while the Lebanese National News Agency said that a BMW car has exploded 2 kilometers away from one of Hezbollah centers in the area. The agency added that the initial information mentioned that the car was stopped by one of Hezbollah barriers, which was watching it. The blast happened either when the guards opened fire at it or when the suicide bomber detonated himself in the car. Finally, terrorism has gone beyond all acceptable standards and religions in Iraq, and now terrorists are trapping houses, shopping centers and establishments and detonating them with people inside. Terrorists of the Islamic State of Iraq and Asham have trapped 23 houses with their people during the past 2 days in Kirkuk, Al-Mosul and Tikrit of Salah ad-Din Governorate, as 1,411 houses have been exploded during the past 6 months, while 1996 Iraqis were killed and more than 3,000 were injured. On the other hand, security sources said that Al-Qaeda gangs were sexually abusing widows on the basis of wrong interpretation of Islamic law in Hamreen Mountains. Some of those widows left their homes and others went to police centers. With this, we end our news for today. Thank you for watching. For more details about Syria and the region and to view this bulletin again, you can always visit our website in English, syriaonline.sy. Now to latest business and market news with Nariman Qassam, but after a short break.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. The Director General of the Insurance Commission affirmed that the maritime insurance sector's activity has increased, especially in the field of services in the third quarter of this year. The installments paid during the period amounting to 991 million Syrian pounds have grown at a percentage of 9.5% compared to the same period last year. He added that about 70% of the maritime insurance activity was governmental, represented by the Syrian Insurance General Establishment, which had the biggest share. The Director General of the Cotton Marketing Establishment said that the total quantities of cotton delivered last week have exceeded 36.3 thousand tons in all gins, asserting that the received amounts decreased during this season as a result of the terrorist acts. The director added that the received amounts of cotton produced about 12,000 tons of ginned cotton, which were delivered to the yarn companies to produce about 22,000 tons of seeds. U.S. crude oil fell as the distilled and gasoline inventories increased last week in the U.S., signaling a vast supply in the world's biggest oil consumer. Futures dropped 0.4%. Brent for February settlement slid 0.6% to reach $109 a barrel. European stocks declined following their biggest rally in 2 months, as investors awaited the outcome of the Federal Reserve meeting starting today, while Japanese shares rose with the Topix index advancing for the first time in 5 days. Gold advanced for the third day and silver gained, as investors awaited the U.S. Federal Reserve's decision on the timeline for reducing stimulus. Gold for February delivery was little changed at $1,244 an ounce. The dollar was within 1% for a 5-year high versus the yen, as the Federal Reserve begins a 2-day meeting today and before data forecast to show inflation picked up in November. Ladies and gentlemen, this was our economic news for today. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.